trying to figure out what exactly we're going to be talking about. So first I'm going to introduce our moderator, Mr. Andrew Lee, who is the new media director for the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He's also worked for the Republican National Convention in the War Room and also with volunteer outreach. He went to Furman College, and what a lot of people don't know about him is that he's very musically inclined, and he performed at Carnegie Hall. He's also a dear friend of mine, and even though we might differ from time to time on things, we have a lot of things that we hold in common. Next, I'll be introducing Ms. Tara Setmeyer. She's currently the communications director for Representative Dana Warbacher from California. She's appeared on numerous types of programs such as No Mayor, 2020, and NPR. She's also a member of the National Advisory Council for Project 21 and a political trainer for GOPAC, which is a conservative organization which trains Republicans to run at a grassroots level. I'll now be introducing Mr. Timothy Johnston. Mr. Johnston is the chair of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and that's a public policy organization which looks at innovative ways to fix problems that are in this country. He also, very interestingly, was the vice chair of the North Carolina Republican Party, and he's actually the first Black person to hold this position since 1867. He was a member of the military, and what I found out, interestingly enough, is that he's also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Next, I'll be introducing Mr. Rich Counts. Mr. Rich Counts is an associate at EOP Group. He also is the former chairman of the DC Young Republicans, where he deployed over 400 volunteers in 9 states in 2010. He is the co-director of the Capitol Hill networking event in First Fridays, which was in Washington Times, it was in the Washington Post, and it was also on Roll Call. He also is faculty at the Leadership Institute, which is a leading conservative organization for training individuals. And I will last be introducing Mr. Bryce, who is a former Fox News contributor, and he's also a spokesperson for the hiphoprepublican.com. And he's also done lots of numerous things within different organizations, and we are very happy and pleased to have such an esteemed panel here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Andrew Lee to start the discussion.
All right, thank you, Greg. All right, everyone, I'm Andrew Lee. We're going to start off with a brief history of the Republican Party. The party was founded in 1854 on the basis of freeing slaves and promoting equal rights for African Americans. Throughout the 20th century, the party up until the 1960s and 70s actually promoted civil rights. If you look at the platform of the party, up until the 1960 convention, it's actually a turning point for the party, and a lot of people say that's when they embraced the Southern strategy. So, in 1960, JFK was running against Richard Nixon at the time. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in Georgia. JFK made a call to Coretta, and after that, things began to change. So the Republican Party up until that time could receive about 40% of the African American vote, and now we're at about 5%. In this past election in 2008, over 95% of African Americans supported now President Barack Obama. So that's going to be the first question to start off with. Why do you think that is to the panel, that African Americans have shied away, or the relationships between the Republican Party and African Americans has changed so drastically?
Ladies first. Well, I think what's interesting about this, and it's never good when you have an overwhelming majority of people doing the same thing. You know, in the Bible it says the road to destruction is wide, and there's a reason for that principle that applies, I think, in a lot of things. The Republican Party, as far as a political entity, I think has fallen short in that there's been such a disconnect with the Republican Party politics and public policy that affects the African American community since the 60s. And the interesting dichotomy here is that the Democrat policies set in place in the 60s, starting with the Great Society, were meant to enslave Black America for the next 100 years. You know, Lyndon Johnson said, I'll have those N-words vote Democrat for the next 100 years. That's a fact. He said that. And if you look at how the black community has been devastated by the Great Society, by the welfare state, but trillions of dollars spent, and you look around, and I'm sorry, but our urban communities, what have we produced? What has been the result of that? It's been devastating. The father's been removed from the family. There's no incentive to be married anymore. We have generations living on government assistance. That, to me, is modern-day enslavement. So the Republicans have a message of, well, conservatives, because I'll tell you right now, I'm conservative first. And my principles will always trump politics. I'll be the first one to call the Republican Party out when they're not doing the right thing. And I will never compromise my personal belief system for any kind of political party necessarily. So it's important to have that belief system. So for blacks, conservative, they're mostly conservative on most issues, particularly social issues, but yet it doesn't translate into public policy or into voting behavior because the perception that the Republican Party has put out there over the last 40 years is that they're for the rich white guy. They don't care about the average folks, and it's just about empowering the rich white guy system. And that's really not true. Is there some aspect to that? Sure. The other side is just as guilty. When you're at that level, believe me, there's a whole lot of that going on the other side. But because perception is reality, because social repetition becomes reality, you keep hearing the same thing over and over again. Well, Republicans are for white folks, they're for the rich, they're for the rich, they're for the rich. You're going to start to believe that. And unfortunately, the party has done a piss poor job of countering that on a national level. So for many, many years, since I was a very green, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed college student at George Washington University back in 1993, I've been trying to hammer home the point that you cannot look at numbers in this case. You have to look at establishing relationships, because how else are we going to counterbalance what's been drummed into people's heads for generations about Democrats are for Black America and Republicans aren't, unless you establish relationships. You have to set an example. So that's partially why I do what I do. I don't know what motivates everybody else in this panel, but I know I do what I do to set an example so people can see that there actually is another side. I'll never be apologetic for being a Republican or a conservative. And and Tim joked and said, we don't fight. There's something wrong with the fact that people look at us like we're a different species. No, we're not. Just because we have an R next to our name doesn't make us any different, any less in touch with the community, most of us, than others. So why is Black America voting overwhelmingly Democrat? I think a lot of it has to do with social repetition, perception, and the Republican Party and conservatives not doing a good job of setting an example in the communities of why our belief system is actually congruent with yours and why you should pay attention. So hopefully that will change.
All right, let's turn to Mr. Bryson. Before we do that, actually, if you have questions throughout the course of this event, I encourage you to tweet at me. My Twitter name is PL the Watcher, and I'll be checking my laptop and we'll try to incorporate some of those questions into the phone.
Such the new media director.
Just to chime on, and once again, Branson Bryce, I think it's an issue of relevance. I think moving forward, when we look at what is the agenda not of the past, but of the present and of the future, we really have to look at the relevancy of issues where I think one of the biggest mishaps in our party has been the focus on, well, ideology and values. But I think when you have 15% unemployment in the African American community, when you have the family structure just completely broken up, you have high unemployment rates and quality or lack thereof quality education in majority Black and brown communities, I think there's a disconnect between what is reality and in many cases what our party so much at the national level has promoted. Now, I think there's an opportunity there. The opportunity is for more African Americans, more Hispanics, more minorities to take the opportunity to join a party that does believe in empowering the individual, looking at ways to help build self-sufficiency, things that have traditionally made us, I think, as African Americans stronger. Even if you look at between 2002 and 2007, we had 62% of our minority business actually grew under that time era. And so I think when we talk about the messaging and the business of politics, it's important to look at what is being said versus what is perception, or versus what is not perception. I've always said it's not necessarily what you say, but it's what people hear. And I think whenever you look at conservative versus Democrat. You know, if you take any look at any major city in the United States, I actually come from Detroit, if we have any Detroiters in the room, but the majority of minority-based inner cities are under Democratic control. Now, I'm a conservative first, but when you have too much of groupthink of anything, you have people who take advantage of it. And they look at the possibility that I don't have to work for your vote. And so I think it's important when we talk about regardless, whether you're an independent, a Republican, or a Democrat, the question as black people we should be asking is, have you earned my vote? Not, did my grandparents vote that way? Is it what I think is right? It's, have you earned my vote, and are you talking the relevant issues that actually will propel our communities forward and will propel our nation forward?
All right, any other comments from the panel? All right, that's actually a really good segue. Has the president earned our vote as a community? The recent job numbers, unemployment just came out. Unemployment is still at 8.3%. Over 227,000 jobs were added this month alone. But for the African American community, unemployment actually went up from 13.7% to 14.1%. So let's get into that a little bit. All right, again, Mr. Price.
Just to chime on that, actually the national number actually I think is about 14.2 unemployment, and unemployment has actually increased in the last 3 years versus 2008's numbers. I think when we talk about the president, we've got to look at it from two different angles. I know there was a recent debate that the president's not black enough, but this is once again the president of the United States. This is not the president of African Americans, it's not the president of white America, this is the president of every American in this country. And so I think it's important that we take it for what it is to say, you know, is it the president's job to solely focus on our issues, or is it the president's job to actually run, facilitate the country to the best of his ability? Now, with that said, I think we have an excellent debate here, because on the one end, you know, when we talk about the healthcare message versus unemployment, healthcare is a direct influence factor of unemployment. You know, most people want public option because they may not have employment to take care of their particular coverage. And so do I think he's failed in the sense of the economy? Yes, from the perspective that, you know, if we can take care of the economic factors in our society, that stems many other issues like healthcare,